Northwest businessman Suleiman Karim is scheduled to appear before the Madlanga Commission this morning after being subpoenaed to testify. Two other witnesses are also expected to appear, including IDAC State Advocate Drusanta Ramsamy and Witness P. Let's hand it over to Sakina and Canny, who are there at the Commission. Sakina?
Thanks, Leanne. And of course, getting straight into it with Canny, we spoke in the previous crossing about Suleiman Karim. Let's focus on what we've heard over the past 2 days with regard to Bevan Loftus, the late Bevan Loftus now, and of course, extrajudicial killings that are being alleged against some of the special units in KwaZulu-Natal.
Well, absolutely. We first saw the evidence from the IPID Deputy Director of Investigations, that is Mr. Len John, who highlighted that there may be a risk with task teams in the KZN province. We've now actually learned that the task team that is being focused on, which is the CIT task team under the command of a Lieutenant Colonel Dina Govender of, I think it's the Hawks anti-gang unit. If we look back at the testimony, it seems that that team wasn't even legally constituted. So it actually may not even be a legitimate task team as what the evidence may have suggested earlier. But effectively, why this evidence could engage the Commission's terms of reference is because even though it speaks about extrajudicial killings and how the intention is never to arrest but to allegedly kill those suspects who also happen to carry certain patterns, just as the extrajudicial killings carry certain patterns, it becomes part of the terms of reference because it seems that in this regard, and the Bevan Loftus case, that it seems that the tow tracking gang, which is a form of an alleged syndicate or cartel, has infiltrated different members of the South African police services and now allegedly has these members acting in their interests, because it is believed that the Bevan Loftus incident was an alleged murder, not a shootout. And there are multiple layers to this evidence, because on one hand you have an individual that is described as a notorious criminal in Durban, particularly in some of those areas where they are vulnerable to gangs and the activities of gangs. And in the same breath, you have police who are acting in a certain manner that is consistent, let's put it that way, with the characteristics of extrajudicial killings, because it always happens at odd hours. They're in plain clothes. The suspects are always persons with large criminal records, and then of course it's always a shootout in self-defense, and there are no witnesses to attest to whether or not that claim is true. I do think though that Captain Houston, the retired captain, has added different layers through his very technical evidence of how it is improbable that they went into that small flat and were allegedly attacked by the suspects, because the statements try to suggest that all 5 of those officers began shooting at the same time. And he says because they were using rifles, it's impossible, because they would have had to line up behind each other to get into that small corridor to get into the main apartment. He also looks at the bullet holes and how low they are. That if you were engaged with someone who was attacking you, he said the firearm should have been up, not down, or not facing that downward position. The downward position severely contradicts what the cops were speaking about in terms of a shootout and self-defense. And this is a historical issue that is discussed, particularly in the KZN province, of extrajudicial killings, where it follows a similar pattern. You may have some people who are saying it's believable that the suspects may have shot at them, but the circumstances of the scene suggest something very different could have taken place there. And it's about addressing that particular error, because you can't have a scenario where you are justifying extrajudicial killings because the suspects happen to be notorious, alleged notorious gangsters. It's about the mandate that police have, which is not to kill the suspects. It's to go there, investigate, arrest, and do the work of police officers. It's about restoring that rule of law. However, there's, this is a debate that goes on and on and on in terms of extrajudicial killings. It's a historical issue, but in the case of Bevan Loftus, what is being highlighted is an imminent risk of an alleged infiltration, and that is what engages the Commission's terms of reference. But of course, there are other layers to the evidence which shows that multiple things can be true at the same time. It could be possible that these were alleged notorious gangsters, and it could have been possible, according to Captain Houston, that the actions of the police that day were quote-unquote overkill.
Well, And of course, that will be parked for today, for the time being, as the Commission will pivot back to Suleiman Karim, his evidence, and then, of course, that will be at 9:30 a.m. They will start with the Karim matter, and then, of course, what will follow from there, possibly evidence by Advocate Ramsamy and, of course, Witness P.